The Forgotten World. For thousands of years, Earth had been a forgotten story in the galaxy. Its name had been erased from the star maps, its people long thought to be extinct. The alien races that had invaded the planet years ago, the ones responsible for its destruction, believed they had wiped out humanity completely. Earth was just another ancient, dead world. Or so they thought. The galaxy moved on, expanding, conquering, and thriving. No one cared about Earth anymore. The powerful races that ruled the stars saw the Earthlings as weak, insignificant. Earth had been just one of many planets that fell to their might. The stories of humanity, the brave species that once thrived on a beautiful planet, were dismissed as nothing but myths, legends meant to explain the ruins that remained. But they were wrong. Deep in the quiet corners of space, far from the reach of the galaxy's powerful civilizations, Earth was not dead. It wasn't just a ruin. Humanity had survived. They had retreated, hidden, and bided their time. They had not been destroyed. They had been waiting for the right moment to return. A signal, faint but unmistakable, began to pulse in the emptiness of space. It was weak at first, just a ripple in the fabric of the stars. But as time passed, the signal grew stronger, its frequency clearer. It was a message, one that had been sent from Earth. Humanity was still alive. The galaxy had long forgotten the Earthlings, but they would soon remember. The human survivors had rebuilt, hidden away from the eyes of those who believed they had won. And now, they were ready to take action. In the control rooms of powerful alien ships, the first signs of this new threat were spotted. The scouts didn't know what to make of it. The old coordinates, the ones leading to Earth, were nothing more than a place filled with cosmic debris. But as they focused their instruments on the distant coordinates, something unexpected appeared on their screens. Energy readings that were unlike anything they had encountered before. There was a source of power, an energy surge, coming from the old world. The first reports of Earth's return were met with disbelief. The invaders had left Earth in ruins. No one expected anything to be left behind. The galaxy's leaders and scholars laughed at the idea. Humanity was nothing more than a faded memory, they said. A species that had no place in the galaxy. But there were some, few in number, who took the reports seriously. They knew the history, the stories of the human race. The ones who had seen Earth from the distant corners of the galaxy whispered in hushed tones that the humans were no mere species to be forgotten. And now, those whispers were becoming louder. Humanity was not dead. They were no longer the weak and fractured species they once were. They had grown stronger in the shadows. The leaders of the galaxy could not ignore it any longer. After centuries of peace, the sudden appearance of a threat that had been erased from memory sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The first thought was to dismiss it, but the energy readings continued to grow. And soon, they could no longer ignore the truth. Humanity had returned. But this was not the same Earth that had been invaded all those years ago. No, the Earth of today was far different. The survivors had learned, adapted, and rebuilt. Hidden technologies had been found deep within the remains of their cities, and new weapons were created from the ashes of their destroyed world. The very planet that had once been the site of their destruction now stood as a symbol of their rebirth. The human race had been shattered, but they were now stronger than ever. The galaxy had underestimated humanity once, and it would make that mistake again. This time, the humans were not going to lie down and accept their fate. They had endured the darkest of days, and they were ready to make their return known. They were not the forgotten species. They were the one species that would never be erased from the universe's memory. The signal from Earth continued to grow stronger, its reach extending far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The message was clear. Humanity had returned, and it was time for the galaxy to remember the name of Earth. The forgotten world was no longer forgotten. The time for silence was over. Humanity was coming back, and they were coming with a vengeance. The galaxy had been peaceful for millennia. Races that once fought for dominance had settled into quiet alliances, and the vast expanse of space seemed to stretch endlessly in harmony. The old wars, the ones that shattered planets and decimated species, were nothing but stories now. But all of that was about to change. The first signs were subtle, small shifts in the cosmic dust. A signal here, a strange energy spike there. At first, no one took them seriously. The Galactic Council had bigger concerns. It wasn't until the old network of scouts started reporting unusual activity around the forgotten coordinates of Earth that the first real hint of danger appeared. Deep within the Council's control room, the mood shifted. A transmission had come in from a far-off sector, intercepted and decoded, the message clear yet incomprehensible. Earth, alive. Humanity returns. The words fell on silent ears as the Council representatives exchanged uneasy glances. Earth, the once dead planet, a world thought to have fallen into nothingness thousands of years ago. Impossible. No one believed that a species like humanity, whose empire had been crushed under the weight of alien might, could rise again. But something was happening. They could see it now. The energy readings were growing exponentially, building at a rate far beyond what any civilization should be capable of after such a long absence. The signal, faint at first, was now undeniable, pulsing with terrifying regularity. It was as if Earth had awoken from a long slumber, and it was bringing with it something that sent ripples through the very fabric of the galaxy. The whispers of Earth's return spread like wildfire. In the hushed corners of the Galactic Council chambers, debates raged. Some insisted it was just a rogue experiment or a mistake. Others, particularly those who had been on the front lines of the ancient invasion, remembered the humans all too well. Those were the ones who feared the worst. They were the ones who understood what it meant for the humans to be alive again. The Council's top strategist, Kairos, was the first to break the silence. His voice was low, but his words carried a weight that demanded attention. We cannot afford to ignore this. Humanity may have been small, but they are relentless. We must not forget the lessons of our past. His words sent a chill through the room. The Galactic Council had long dismissed Earth as insignificant. They believed the species had been wiped out and that nothing remained of their once proud civilization. But Kairos knew better. He had witnessed humanity's strength firsthand. He had seen how they fought for survival, how they adapted, how they never stopped pushing forward. "Send a fleet," he ordered. "Immediately. We need to know what we're dealing with." As the order was sent to assemble a strike force, something else began to stir. On Earth itself, a quiet hum filled the air. The survivors, scattered and hidden for so long, had sensed the approaching change. They knew that their time had come. The world had been in a constant state of rebirth, but now humanity was ready to reclaim what had been taken from them. In the hidden bunkers beneath the ruins of once great cities, ancient machines powered to life. Technology, long thought lost, buzzed and sparked with new purpose. The humans were ready, their power fully restored. They had rebuilt their armies, forged new weapons, and devised strategies for this moment. They had been waiting for the galaxy to forget, for the invaders to believe they had been defeated. But they were far from defeated. The signal from Earth pulsed once more, louder now, sending shockwaves across the galaxy. The fleet assembled by the Council was only hours away, but the humans were already aware of their presence. They were not blind to the movements of the stars. They had prepared, and they were ready for war. Aboard one of the Galactic Council's flagship vessels, a high-ranking officer, Nima, stared at the approaching data. Her expression was cold, but her eyes flickered with uncertainty. "This is no coincidence," she murmured. "They've been waiting. They knew we would come." "Are you suggesting humanity planned this?" asked another officer, his voice skeptical. "How could they have known we would return?" Nima didn't answer immediately. She studied the data more closely, feeling the tension build. "I don't know how they knew, but it's clear that they have been preparing. Earth may have been forgotten, but we were wrong to underestimate them." The officer's face twisted with disbelief. Are we talking about the same species that we destroyed? The one that couldn't even defend its own planet? Naima's gaze hardened. We underestimated them before, and we will pay for it. Back on Earth, the preparations were nearing completion. Humanity's fleets, once small and scattered, had been revived. Great ships, their hulls repaired and modified, now moved through the atmosphere. The stars seemed to shine brighter as the human forces rose from their hiding places. The time had come. The first waves of ships launched from Earth's surface, sleek and armed, heading straight for the heart of galactic space. The galaxy had long since forgotten humanity's resilience, their capacity to survive against all odds. They had assumed that Earth was just a story, a myth. But soon, they would learn the hard truth. Humanity had been reborn, and they had a score to settle. The countdown had begun. Earth was no longer a forgotten world. Humanity had awakened, and their vengeance was coming for the invaders who had destroyed their home. The Galactic Council's fleet was on the move, but they had no idea what awaited them. Their ships, sleek and powerful, cut through the vastness of space, their engines glowing with a menacing intensity. They were confident, believing that no force could stand against them. After all, Earth had been a forgotten world for thousands of years, its people erased from the galaxy's memory. But they were about to learn how wrong they were. At the edge of the Council's fleet, a small scout ship drifted, quietly watching the stars ahead. It was a routine check, a simple mission to monitor the area near Earth's old coordinates. The crew aboard the scout ship had no idea that the entire galaxy was on the brink of chaos. They were only focused on their task, unaware that Earth's long-dormant defenses were already coming online. Suddenly, the sensors blared to life. The crew scrambled to assess the data, eyes wide with disbelief. Something was coming toward them. Fast, too fast. The unknown ship wasn't showing up on any of the Council's charts. It wasn't supposed to be there. "Captain, we're picking up a massive energy signature. Directly ahead," the lead officer shouted, his voice thick with panic. The captain's eyes narrowed as he studied the readings. "Impossible," he muttered. "There's no fleet in that sector." But the readings didn't lie. The unknown vessel was large, far larger than any ship they had encountered, and it was closing in fast. Before they could react, the ship fired. A single shot, but one that sent shockwaves through the scout ship's hull. The crew gasped as alarms rang, and the walls trembled. The once pristine vessel was now nothing more than a debris field. The shot had come from the darkness of space, and in a blink, their world ended. No distress signal reached the Council. No warning, just a sudden explosion of light, and then silence. The fleet commander on the flagship Naima watched in stunned silence as the scout ship disappeared from the radar. The coordinates were clear. They had been in that sector for hours, and now, nothing. Not even a trace of debris remained. Her mind raced as she connected the dots. "That wasn't a random attack," Naima said quietly, her voice sharp. "It was a calculated strike. The humans, they're alive." The room went silent. The Council officers exchanged nervous glances. They had all heard the whispers, the rumors of Earth's return, but no one had believed it. They had underestimated humanity once before, and now they were paying the price. "We have to assume the worst," Naima continued, standing straighter. "They've been preparing. They know we're coming, and they are ready to fight." Meanwhile, on Earth, the first wave of humanity's fleet was already moving through the stars. Their ships were unlike anything the Council had seen. Large, hulking vessels, built for war, adorned with scars from centuries of neglect. They had been reborn from the ashes of a once great civilization, and now they were prepared to make their presence known. At the helm of the flagship, General Kale stood, his gaze fixed on the starry expanse ahead. His face was hard, a reflection of years spent in the shadows, waiting for the moment to strike. He was a leader of men, a warrior of unparalleled skill, and his eyes burned with the fire of revenge. "We've waited long enough," Kale muttered to himself, his fingers lightly brushing the control panel. "Now we make them pay." The fleet moved with terrifying precision. The old technology had been refurbished, but it was still as deadly as it had been all those years ago. Massive cannons, once thought obsolete, powered up, their energy readings flashing across the ship's display. The once forgotten humans had built a fleet that could rival any in the galaxy. They were no longer a primitive species. They were a force to be reckoned with. Back in the heart of the Galactic Council, chaos was beginning to unfold. Naima quickly issued orders for the fleet to reroute and prepare for battle. She knew this was only the beginning. The Council had made a grave mistake in underestimating humanity, and now they were facing the consequences. As the Council's fleet adjusted its course, they were unaware that the real danger was just beginning. The human fleet was moving silently, hidden in the dark corners of space, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. The first attack was only a warning, a reminder of the power humanity wielded. Across the galaxy, the surviving remnants of Earth watched in anticipation. They had no illusions about the battle ahead. They knew the Council would retaliate, but they were ready. They had prepared for this moment, and they would not falter. Earth had been forgotten for far too long, and now, the time had come to remind the galaxy what humanity was capable of. The strike force moved closer to the heart of the Galactic Council's territory. As they approached, they activated their weapons, and a dark, almost palpable tension filled the void of space. Humanity's revenge had only just begun, and the galaxy was about to witness a force unlike anything it had seen before. The first strike was over, but what came next would be even worse for the Council. The humans were back, and they were not just seeking vengeance. They were declaring war. The fight for Earth's honor had begun. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. The first strike had been a warning shot, a brutal reminder of the power humanity had held all those millennia ago. But what came next would be a flood of destruction, one that would shake the foundations of the Galactic Council to its core. The Council's fleet scrambled to regroup. Naima, still processing the loss of the scout ship, was already preparing for the inevitable battle. They had not expected this. They had assumed that Earth's inhabitants had been eradicated, lost to history. Now, they were paying for that assumption. "We need to deploy the defensive fleets," Naima ordered, her voice cold and commanding. "And prepare for an all-out assault. We can't afford another surprise." The commanders nodded, their faces grim. They understood the stakes now. The humans weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for vengeance. And when humans fought with rage, they were a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. As the Galactic Council's warships spread out, humanity's fleet grew larger. It was as though the long-forgotten species had been waiting, watching, and planning for this moment. Their ships, once thought to be obsolete and destroyed, were now gleaming with deadly force. Hidden beneath layers of debris and dust, they had rebuilt. They were not just seeking revenge. They were preparing for the extinction of anyone who dared stand in their way. On Earth, General Kale stood before a holographic map of the galaxy, his fingers tracing the locations of the Council's fleet. Each star system was now a target. Earth had been the first, and the humans would make sure it would be the last. He knew that the Council would retaliate. They had no choice, but he had one advantage. Humans never forgot. "Prepare the fleet," Kale commanded, his voice steady but filled with a quiet fury. "Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have, ready for the final strike. We take no prisoners." The massive human ships, each one a fortress in its own right, began to move. The Council's defensive fleets were formidable, but humanity had something they did not: a reason to fight. The humans weren't just defending their home, they were avenging it. And that made them unstoppable. The first major clash took place in the outskirts of the Galactic Council's territory. A human warship, the Vengeance, came into view. It was a behemoth, its metal hull scarred from years of disrepair, but it was still an unstoppable force. The Galactic fleet saw it coming, and their weapons charged up, prepared to meet the threat head-on. But what they didn't know was that the humans had a weapon far deadlier than anything the Council had prepared for: cunning. The humans weren't charging blindly into the fray. They were calculating, always one step ahead. The Vengeance didn't fire immediately. Instead, it moved closer, slowly, purposefully. Its sensors were analyzing the Council's fleet, looking for weak points. "Lock onto the rear shield generators," General Kale ordered. "We're taking them down from the inside." The Vengeance launched its attack not at the front lines, but at the rear, where the Council's ships were the most vulnerable. In an instant, the Galactic fleet's rear defenses collapsed. The humans had found the weak spot. A massive explosion rocked the Vengeance, but it held steady, its hull holding firm against the assault. Humanity's ships moved in close, and the first wave of Council warships fell before they even had a chance to retaliate. It was an overwhelming show of force. The rest of the Council fleet, still reeling from the shock of the attack, began to retreat. But the humans weren't letting them escape. They followed with precision, their ships cutting through space like predators chasing their prey. One by one, the Council's ships were disabled or destroyed. Back on Earth, the cheering began. The humans had made their mark. They had shown the galaxy what they were capable of, and the Council knew it. This was just the beginning. The humans had come to finish what was started so many years ago, and they weren't about to stop now. The Council's officials were in disarray. Their attempts to regroup and counterattack were falling apart. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. The leaders of the Galactic Council scrambled to issue new orders, to form new plans, but it was already too late. The humans were on the move again. Nema stood on the command bridge of the flagship, her eyes narrowing as she observed the unfolding disaster. The humans were relentless, and every time they struck, it was harder to defend against them. "They're not just fighting for Earth," Nema muttered, her tone filled with a mixture of disbelief and admiration. "They're fighting for everything they've lost. We didn't just awaken a species, we awoke a nightmare." As the Council's ships retreated, the humans did not hesitate. The fleet surged forward, unstoppable and fierce. The Council had no idea just how far humanity would go. The fight was only just beginning, and the galaxy was about to witness the full wrath of a species that had nothing left to lose. The humans had returned, and they weren't just coming for revenge. They were coming for victory. The stars that once seemed so peaceful now burned with the fury of war. Humanity's return had thrown the galaxy into a whirlwind of chaos, and there was no turning back. The Council had thought they could sit back and enjoy their victory over Earth. But now, in the face of humanity's wrath, it seemed as if their empire was crumbling. General Kale stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, staring out at the unfolding chaos. His heart was heavy, but his resolve was unshakable. Earth had been ravaged once. Now they would show the galaxy what humans were capable of when they had nothing left to lose. He turned to his officers. "We will not stop until every last one of them pays for what they did. Prepare to strike at the heart of their empire." Kel's words were met with a sharp nod from his crew. They were as driven as he was, their hearts burning with the same fire. They were not just fighting for vengeance. They were fighting for the future of humanity. And no one, not the Council, nor any other species in the galaxy, would stand in their way. The Vengeance was joined by a fleet of other human warships, each one built for destruction. These ships were not the crude vessels the Council had once mocked. They were finely crafted, forged from the ashes of Earth, and designed to deal with the galaxy's greatest threats. Each ship was a weapon of war in its own right, with advanced weaponry and shields that had been tested in the fires of battle. The humans weren't just fighting with technology. They were fighting with their minds, their hearts, and their will to survive. They had been pushed to the brink once, and now they would push back harder than any enemy had ever imagined. As the human fleet advanced, Nema watched from her flagship. Her face was grim. She had spent decades building the Council's empire, but she had never faced an enemy like this before. The humans were unpredictable, relentless, and cunning. They didn't just fight, they adapted. Every tactic, every move, was calculated, and each attack seemed to hit with precision. "They're everywhere," Naima said through gritted teeth. "How are they doing this?" One of the fleet commanders spoke up. "It's their fleet coordination. They don't just attack blindly. They're hitting us where we're weakest. And their technology. It's evolving faster than we can keep up with." Naima clenched her fists. "We underestimated them. And now we're paying the price." The Vengeance led the charge as the humans cut through the Council's defensive lines. Their ships were like shadows in the void, moving swiftly and silently, taking down targets with deadly accuracy. Each human warship seemed to be everywhere at once, attacking from unexpected angles, using the terrain of space to their advantage. The battle grew fiercer by the hour. The Council's fleets scrambled to protect their worlds, but the humans were relentless. They cut through defenses, took out key infrastructure, and left nothing but destruction in their wake. It was clear to Nema and the Council leaders that they were losing not just a battle, but a war. Meanwhile, on Earth, General Kel's orders were clear. Strike at their heart. Destroy their capitals. Make them know what it feels like to lose everything. The humans had been building up to this moment for centuries. They had taken their time, watching, waiting, gathering strength. Now, they were unleashing that power with devastating results. Each human warship was a harbinger of doom, and the Council had no idea how to stop them. As the Vengeance tore through another fleet, Kale stood in the command room, his eyes burning with a fierce determination. "We will finish this. For Earth. For our people." The Vengeance moved in closer to the Council's most heavily defended planet. It was a stronghold, a symbol of the Council's power. But the humans were about to show them just how weak they truly were. The Council had underestimated humanity for far too long, and now they were about to pay the price. Kel's voice was calm, but deadly. "Target their main weapons platform. Take it down, and the planet will fall." With precision, the human fleet launched a series of coordinated strikes. The Council's weapons platform, the heart of their planetary defenses, was hit with a barrage of fire. The explosion was massive, a brilliant flash of light that illuminated the darkness of space. The planet's defenses faltered, and the Council fleet scrambled to mount a defense, but it was too late. "Victory is ours," Kale said quietly, watching as the last remnants of the Council's forces fell apart. The humans had made their statement. Earth had been avenged. But Kale knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy would never forget the day humanity returned, and neither would the Council. As their empire burned, the humans moved on, relentless in their pursuit of victory. Nema stood on the bridge of her flagship, staring out at the destruction. The loss was beyond anything she could have imagined. Her empire, built over thousands of years, was crumbling. Humanity had come back, and they had proven just how dangerous they could be. With a final deep breath, Naima turned to face the remaining Council leaders. "We must regroup. We must find a way to stop them. But we can't afford to fail again. If we do, there will be nothing left of us." The Council had been shaken to its core. Humanity's return had proven that the species that once ruled Earth was not gone, not forgotten. And now, it was only a matter of time before the entire galaxy would know the wrath of humanity. The galaxy was reeling from the shock of humanity's return. The Council's once unshakable rule was now on the verge of collapse, and with each passing day, their position grew more precarious. Every planet they thought they controlled, every fleet they assumed was safe, was now in danger. Humanity had not just come back for revenge. They had come to reshape the galaxy in their own image. And no one was prepared for the full extent of their fury. General Kale watched from the command room of the Vengeance as reports poured in from all over the galaxy. The human fleet was unstoppable. They had decimated entire fleets, taken out the most secure strongholds, and left nothing but devastation in their wake. The Council's leaders, once so proud, were now scattered and defeated. "We've done it," one of Cal's officers said, his voice heavy with awe and exhaustion. "They're breaking. The Council is on the run." Cal, however, wasn't satisfied. He had never been one to celebrate too early. "We're not finished yet," he said, his voice firm. "We've got one last target, the Council's main stronghold, where their leaders are hiding." The human fleet moved through space like a hammer, its objective clear. The Council had retreated to their last remaining bastion, a planet heavily fortified, surrounded by layers of defense, and protected by the best warriors and ships the galaxy had to offer. But the humans were no strangers to tough battles. If anything, they were at their best when the odds were stacked against them. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Kale stared at the map of the Council's stronghold. "This is it," he said, turning to his officers. "The final strike. Once we take this planet, the Council will be finished. We'll show them once and for all what happens when you push humanity to the edge." The fleet set course for the stronghold, and with each passing second, the tension on the bridge grew thicker. The battle ahead would be the hardest yet. The Council had prepared for this moment, building massive defensive platforms and calling in their strongest forces. But what they didn't understand was that humanity didn't care about the odds. They had nothing left to lose. As they approached the stronghold, the humans encountered fierce resistance. The Council's ships filled the skies, firing powerful blasts that rocked the human fleet. Yet the humans pushed forward, their ships cutting through the enemy lines with precision, their weapons firing with deadly accuracy. It was as if every move had been planned for this very moment. "They're fighting back harder than ever," said one of the officers, watching as their forces took fire from the Council's ships. "We might lose more ships than we expected." Cal's eyes narrowed. "We won't lose. We've come too far. We're winning this fight." Despite the Council's fierce defense, the human fleet was relentless. Their ships, equipped with the latest technology and battle strategies, tore through the defenses like a hot knife through butter. The Council's fighters couldn't match the human speed, and their weapons seemed ineffective against the human ship's advanced armor. As the fleet made its way toward the planet, Kale knew that the final battle was about to begin. The stakes had never been higher. If they succeeded, they would break the Council's reign for good. If they failed, everything they had fought for would be lost. The first wave of human troops descended onto the planet's surface, landing with precision on key strategic points. They fought their way through the enemy's defenses, moving fast and hitting hard. The Council had not expected such a quick, brutal strike. It was a war of attrition now, and humanity was prepared to outlast them. On the surface, General Kale led his forces, cutting through enemy lines with ease. The Council's defenders were no match for the humans' tactics and firepower. Each human soldier fought like their life depended on it, because for them, it did. Hours turned into days, and the battle raged on. The Council's forces began to crumble as human soldiers pushed deeper into the stronghold. Every inch they gained was a victory, and every victory brought them closer to their final goal. The Council's leaders. Inside the Council's central command, panic was beginning to set in. Nema, the Council's last hope, paced back and forth. She had seen the writing on the wall. Her empire, the one she had fought so hard to build, was collapsing. Earth's destruction had seemed like a victory, but now, as humanity tore through the galaxy, it felt like nothing more than a hollow achievement. "They're almost here," one of her advisors said, his voice trembling. "We can't stop them. The fleet is being destroyed, and the surface forces are falling back. They're too powerful." Nema clenched her fists, her heart pounding in her chest. "We can't let them win. If they reach us, it's over for the Council." But it was too late. As she spoke those words, Explosions shook the ground beneath their feet. The humans had breached the inner sanctum of the Council's stronghold. Kel's voice crackled over the communication line. "This is the end, Naima. You've underestimated humanity for the last time. Surrender now, and we'll let you live." But Naima refused to give in. "You think you've won. You're wrong. Even if we fall, the galaxy will remember what we've done." Kel's voice was calm but resolute. "The galaxy will remember that we took back what you stole. Earth is ours again." With that, the final assault began. The human forces swept through the Council's command center, taking out the last pockets of resistance. Naima and the remaining Council leaders fought until the end, but they were no match for the relentless, vengeful humans. As the last of the Council's stronghold fell, General Kale stood at the heart of the broken empire, his mission finally complete. Humanity had avenged Earth's destruction, and the galaxy would never forget the price of underestimating humanity again. The dust of battle had barely settled before the final pieces of the once great Council's empire began to crumble. General Kale stood at the heart of the ruined stronghold, his eyes scanning the remnants of what had once been an unshakable seat of power. The silence after the chaos was almost deafening, but Kale welcomed it. The endless war was finally over. Humanity had won. Around him, the ruins were littered with the remains of the Council's forces scattered across the broken command center. Their last stand had been brief, a desperate attempt to hold onto their fragile empire, but in the end, it had been no match for the relentless human assault. The Council had underestimated their adversary in the worst possible way. "It's done," one of Cal's officers said, stepping up to him with a datapad in hand. "The Council's leadership has been eliminated. Their fleets are in disarray. There's nothing left to stop us." Cal nodded, his expression stoic. There was a quiet sense of satisfaction within him, but no time to bask in the victory. The galaxy had been forever changed. The Council's fall was just the beginning. What came next was a new era, an era where humanity would rebuild and reclaim its rightful place in the stars. "Prepare the fleet," Cal ordered, his voice steady. "We're not leaving this system until we can ensure there are no remnants of their power left." His officers moved swiftly, coordinating the final phases of their mission. The human fleet, once scattered and broken, had now become the galaxy's most powerful force. Every ship, every soldier, and every general was committed to ensuring that the Council would never rise again. As Cal surveyed the devastation, he couldn't help but think of the day Earth had fallen. The images of the destruction still haunted him. The flames, the ashes, the lives lost. It was all still fresh in his memory. The Council had believed they could wipe out humanity, erase their existence, and destroy everything Earth had stood for. But humanity had endured. It had survived. And now it had come back with vengeance. The human fleet continued its work, sweeping through the system with unrelenting precision. No part of the Council's empire was left untouched. What remained of their war machines was dismantled, their technology taken, their resources absorbed. The Council's once feared fleets were nothing more than scrap metal and broken systems. Back on the homeworld, the leaders of the human resistance had already begun to rebuild. Earth, once reduced to ashes, now began to show signs of life once more. The cities that had been destroyed were rising from the ruins, and the people were starting to return to their homes. There was a long road ahead, but it was a road filled with hope. News of the human victory spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The races that had once trembled in fear at the Council's power now looked to humanity with awe and respect. What they had once seen as a distant, weak species had shown the universe the full extent of its resilience. They had not only survived, but they had triumphed in the face of unimaginable odds. The other alien civilizations, once hostile or indifferent to humanity's existence, now began to send emissaries. Some came to offer their congratulations, while others came to ensure their safety in the new galactic order. Humanity was no longer just a player in the galaxy. It was the force that had reshaped everything. As Cal and his officers returned to the Vengeance, the flagship of humanity's fleet, he knew that the galaxy would never be the same. The Council's reign was over, and the power vacuum they left behind would be filled with new leaders, new ideologies, and new alliances. "What now, General?" one of his officers asked, breaking the silence. Cal turned to face him, his gaze steady. "Now we make sure that what happened to Earth, what happened to us, never happens again. We'll stand guard over this galaxy, and we'll ensure that no one ever dares to challenge humanity again." The journey to rebuild had only just begun. There were still countless challenges ahead. The galaxy was a vast place, filled with ancient threats and new dangers. But Cal knew one thing for certain: humanity had the strength to face whatever came next. As the Vengeance set course for the next system, Cal looked out at the stars. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless unknowns, but for the first time in centuries, humanity was no longer an afterthought. They were the ones shaping the future. The Council had been wiped out, their reign of terror ended, and the galaxy would now see the true power of Earth and its people. Humanity had returned, and this time they would not be forgotten. The Unlikely Awakening. The galaxy had long believed humanity was gone. For millions of years, their presence had been a fading memory, a distant echo from a time long past. Yet deep in the quiet corners of the universe, something stirred. A signal, faint but unmistakable, began to pulse across the stars. It was a call, an ancient message sent from the depths of space, and it was something no one had expected to hear again. It began on a forgotten planet, once home to the mighty human warships that had once ruled the stars. The world was now abandoned, its surface weathered by time. The people who had once called it home were long gone, and their ships, huge, silent relics, had remained dormant for eons. To the rest of the galaxy, they were nothing more than ruins, memories of an empire that had vanished. But something had changed. The first sign came from the sensors of a nearby space station. They had been monitoring the quiet planet for years, as part of an ongoing study into ancient civilizations. At first, they thought it was just another anomaly, a glitch in the system. But when the signal continued to grow stronger, they knew something was different. The station's commander, Captain Lyra Raylan, looked at the readings on her screen with growing disbelief. "This can't be right," she muttered under her breath. The signal was coming from the planet's surface. It was a series of coded pulses, unlike anything they had ever seen before. The signals were precise, like a message, intelligent, purposeful. She could feel her heart race. Is it really them? She wondered. For years, the galaxy had been searching for answers about what happened to humanity. Some believed they had been wiped out in a great war, their fleets destroyed and their cities turned to ash. Others thought they had simply disappeared, their technology lost to time. But the signal suggested otherwise. Could it be that humanity had not only survived, but had been lying in wait all this time? Captain Ryland immediately ordered her crew to investigate. She couldn't ignore the pull of curiosity, the possibility that humanity's ancient warships were still out there, waiting to be rediscovered. She had heard the old stories, the legends of their unimaginable power. Ships so massive they could crush entire fleets with a single strike. Weapons so advanced they made modern technology look like toys. And yet they had vanished, leaving only myths behind. The crew worked quickly to prepare for the journey. The planet was located on the outer rim, far from the heart of the galaxy. It was a dangerous, uncharted area where few ships ever ventured. But for Captain Ryland, the promise of uncovering the truth about humanity's lost legacy was too strong to ignore. As the ship moved closer to the planet, the tension aboard the vessel grew. The crew could feel something was happening, something monumental. And as they passed through the debris fields surrounding the planet, they saw the first signs of the warships. Huge structures, partially buried beneath the sand and stone, but unmistakable. The shape of a ship, the outline of its hull. These were not ordinary ruins. These were warships built to withstand the harshest of battles and the test of time itself. The crew's excitement quickly turned to disbelief. These ships had been abandoned for centuries, maybe longer. How could they still be intact? The question seemed impossible to answer. Yet there they were. And as the ship descended towards the surface, the signal grew stronger, more urgent. The ground shook slightly as the ship's landing gear touched down. The crew quickly disembarked, their boots crunching on the sand as they moved toward the wreckage. The air was thick with the scent of ancient metal, and the silence was almost overwhelming. It felt as though the planet itself had been holding its breath, waiting for this moment. As they approached the massive hulls, they saw something strange. The ships weren't just intact, they were active. The power systems, once thought to be long dead, were flickering back to life. Lights blinked on in the darkened structures, and a low hum began to fill the air. The crew stood frozen in awe, unable to believe their eyes. "What is happening?" One of the engineers whispered, his voice full of awe and fear. Captain Rylan was silent, staring at the ships. She felt a strange connection to them, as if they were calling to her, inviting her to unlock their secrets. She stepped forward, her hand hovering over the control panel of one of the ships. The hum grew louder, and for a moment, she wondered if the ships were somehow aware of her presence. Then, the impossible happened. The ship's massive engines, dormant for millennia, roared to life. The ground shook with the power of the engines as they began to warm up. The hum turned into a deep, resonant growl. The warship was awakening, and it was alive. Captain Ryland took a step back, her heart racing. The galaxy had thought humanity was gone, erased from the stars. But now, the forgotten fleet had risen. The warships were back, and no one knew what it meant. In the silence of space, the fleet began to move, slowly at first, but with increasing speed, as though the ships had been waiting for this moment for a long time. The question echoed in the minds of every crew member. What had caused this? And what would happen next? The story of humanity was far from over. The ancient warships were awake, and the galaxy would soon feel their power once again. Captain Ryland stood frozen, her eyes locked on the enormous warship before her. The ancient vessel, once dormant for millennia, now hummed with power. It was as though the ship had never stopped. The lights on its hull flickered on, casting an eerie glow over the crew standing in stunned silence. The air around them felt electric, charged with anticipation. "Is this really happening?" whispered Lieutenant Joran, one of the younger crew members. His voice was shaky, filled with disbelief. He had studied the history of humanity's lost fleet, but never in his wildest dreams had he imagined standing here, in the shadow of these colossal ships. Captain Ryland didn't respond immediately. She couldn't. Her mind was racing. These ships were not just relics from the past. They were still alive, active, ready to move. She stepped closer to the control panel, her hand reaching out to touch it. The moment her fingers brushed the cold metal, the entire ship seemed to respond. The hum grew louder, more intense, as if the ship itself recognized her touch. "Captain," Lieutenant Joran called out, his voice a little more urgent now. Should we try to contact them? Is it safe?" Rylan hesitated for a moment. The warships had been lost for so long, forgotten by the galaxy. The thought of awakening them, of bringing them back into the fold, was both thrilling and terrifying. But one thing was clear. They were no longer just ancient, forgotten relics. These ships were ready to fight, to defend, and perhaps to conquer once again. "We need to understand what we're dealing with first," she said, her voice steady despite the rising storm of thoughts in her mind. "Let's move carefully. We don't know what triggered them to wake up." The crew nodded, exchanging uneasy glances. They knew the risks. These were not just ships. These were humanity's battle fleets, built for war, each one capable of turning the tide in any conflict. The galaxy had long since forgotten what these warships could do, until now. As the crew carefully moved through the ship's corridors, they couldn't help but marvel at the technology surrounding them. The walls were adorned with strange symbols, ancient markings that no one on the ship recognized. It was clear that humanity had achieved something incredible long before they disappeared. The engines were still purring with life, their power systems humming with a terrifying strength. It was like stepping into a time capsule, a glimpse into a long-forgotten age. "Captain," said Lieutenant Rylan, breaking the silence. "There's something else. We're getting strange readings. It's not just the warships that are active. There's an entire network of them, hundreds, maybe thousands, all across the galaxy." The captain's heart skipped a beat. This was far more than she had anticipated. One ship was already beyond their control. But to think that there were entire fleets scattered across the stars, waiting to be activated. The galaxy was in for something far bigger than they could imagine. "What does this mean?" she asked, her voice low, almost to herself. The crew had no answers. How could they? No one had ever anticipated this, not even the historians who had studied humanity's ancient legacy. "We need to gather as much information as we can," Captain Ryland said, finally composing herself. "We have to figure out where the other ships are and why they're waking up now. This is bigger than we thought." As the crew continued their exploration of the warship, they noticed more signs of life. The ship's systems, once thought to be inactive, were now beginning to come online, piece by piece. Weapons systems powered up, defense shields flickered into place, and the vast communication network buzzed with static. It was as if the ship had been waiting for this moment, ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. Suddenly, a loud mechanical rumble echoed through the ship. The crew tensed, their hands instinctively reaching for their weapons. But Captain Ryland held up a hand, signaling for them to remain calm. The rumble grew louder, and then, in a split second, the entire ship lurched forward. The warship was moving. Slowly at first, as though stretching its long-forgotten limbs, but then with increasing speed. Is it leaving the planet?" Lieutenant Joran asked, his voice a mixture of awe and fear. Captain Ryland watched as the massive warship began to rise into the air, its engines roaring to life. It was taking off, leaving the surface of the planet behind and heading into the vast expanse of space. The crew scrambled to secure themselves, knowing that once the ship left the planet's atmosphere, there would be no turning back. "Prepare for launch," Captain Ryland shouted, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. "We need to follow it. We need to understand what it's doing." As the warship soared into space, the crew felt a surge of adrenaline. This was just the beginning. The fleet was awakening, and no one knew what their return would mean. Would they be allies, or would they reclaim their place as rulers of the stars? One thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same again. The warship, now fully in motion, began to follow a predetermined course. The coordinates were strange, distant, and out of reach for most of the galaxy's current civilizations. But for Captain Ryland, it was a sign that they were heading somewhere important, somewhere that held the key to understanding the true power of humanity's lost fleet. As they ventured deeper into the void, the crew felt a sense of dread, but also excitement. The ancient ships were on the move, and the galaxy's fate was about to change forever. The question on everyone's mind was simple: where were they going, and what would happen when they got there? As the massive warship soared through the cold void of space, Captain Ryland and her crew couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into something far bigger than they could comprehend. The ship's sensors blinked, gathering data about the surrounding space. Everything appeared normal, but the crew knew better. Something was out there, something important. The ship's engines rumbled with power as they glided past planets and stars that seemed to be untouched by time. The vast emptiness of space surrounded them, but the silence was only broken by the hum of the warship's systems. Captain Ryland sat in the command chair, staring at the navigational map. The coordinates were still in their systems, but they made no sense. There was no known destination in this part of the galaxy. "Captain," Lieutenant Joran spoke up, his voice tense. "We've been traveling for hours now. The course hasn't changed. Are you sure we should be following the ship?" Captain Rylan glanced at him, her face hard with resolve. "We have no choice. The fleet is awakening. If we don't follow it, we may never understand why it's here, or what it's meant to do." Lieutenant Joran nodded reluctantly, but kept his eyes on the map. The ship was heading toward an uncharted sector, far beyond the reach of any known civilization. His mind raced with questions. Why had these ships, dormant for so long, chosen now to wake up? And why had this one ship been the first to move? The tension in the room was thick. The crew could sense the weight of the moment. They were not just following orders. They were part of something much larger. They were about to uncover the mysteries of the past, mysteries that had remained hidden for millennia. Captain, Lieutenant Riker, the ship's science officer, spoke, breaking the silence. "I'm detecting something unusual ahead. It's faint, but it's there." The crew leaned forward, their attention shifting to the monitors. There in the distance, a strange signal flickered to life. It wasn't a natural anomaly. This was a message, a signal that had been waiting for someone to find it. The signal was weak, almost as if it had been dormant, just like the ship itself. But now it was pulsing, as though trying to reach them. "What is it?" Rylan asked, her voice steady, but with a hint of urgency. "We're trying to isolate the source now," Lieutenant Riker replied. "It seems to be coming from a nearby asteroid field, but I can't get a precise lock on it. There's a lot of interference." The tension in the air grew thicker. Whatever was out there, they were getting closer. Captain Ryland's thoughts raced. Was this the reason the fleet had awakened? Was this signal a call to action? Her mind swirled with possibilities, but she pushed the thoughts aside. There was no time for doubts. She had a mission to complete, and that mission was to discover the truth about what was happening. "Get us closer," she ordered. "We need to investigate." The crew worked quickly, preparing the ship for a possible encounter. They had no idea what they would find when they reached the asteroid field. Would it be an enemy, an ancient weapon, or something else entirely? As the warship drew closer to the signal source, the feeling of unease grew stronger. The ship seemed to hum with energy, as though it too was preparing for something. Ryland could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. This wasn't just a mission to explore. This was a mission to uncover the forgotten past, and possibly the future of the galaxy. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they arrived. The asteroid field stretched out before them, vast and chaotic, with massive rocks tumbling through space. The signal was stronger now, coming from somewhere deeper within the field. It was as if something, or someone, was waiting for them. "We're in range," Lieutenant Riker announced. "The signal is coming from the largest asteroid in the field. There's an opening. It looks like an entrance." Captain Ryland's heart skipped a beat. An entrance. What could it lead to? This asteroid field had been known as a place of mystery for centuries, but no one had ever ventured deep enough to uncover its secrets. Until now. "Take us in," she commanded, her voice unwavering. The crew maneuvered the ship with skill, navigating the treacherous asteroid field. The warship, though ancient, handled with surprising precision. It was clear that the ship's systems were still intact, capable of dealing with the dangers of space travel. But that didn't mean the crew was out of danger. The field was filled with debris, and one wrong move could spell disaster. As they moved deeper into the asteroid field, the crew watched in awe as the opening they were heading toward grew larger. It wasn't just an entrance. It was a massive structure built into the heart of an asteroid. The walls shimmered with an almost metallic glow, and strange symbols adorned the surface. It was clear that this was no natural formation. It was a creation, one designed by a civilization long forgotten. "We've got to be careful," Captain Ryland warned, her voice filled with caution. "We don't know what we're walking into." The warship slowly entered the structure, and the crew held their breath. The space inside was vast, more so than anyone had expected. The walls stretched out in every direction, and the lights flickered on, as if they had been waiting for this very moment. The entire place felt alive. Then, without warning, a voice crackled through the ship's communication system. "Welcome, travelers," the voice said. It was deep, commanding, and yet strangely calm. "You have arrived at the heart of humanity's legacy. The warships have awakened, and so has the galaxy's greatest secret." Captain Ryland's eyes widened in shock. This was it, the answer to all their questions. But what would they find here? And more importantly, who, or what, had been waiting for them? The ship glided through the enormous, glowing entrance into the heart of the asteroid. Inside, the atmosphere shifted. The walls, covered with strange, intricate symbols, pulsed faintly, like they were alive. The warship's hull hummed with energy as if it, too, recognized the significance of this place. Captain Ryland stood at the helm, her hands gripping the controls tightly. She could feel the weight of history bearing down on her. They were on the brink of uncovering something enormous, something that had been hidden for millennia. The crew remained silent, their eyes wide as they observed the massive structure stretching out before them. No one had expected anything like this. It was more than an underground base or ancient facility. It was a monument, a testament to the power and ambition of a civilization that had long since vanished from the galaxy. "Captain," Lieutenant Riker's voice crackled through the comms, breaking the silence. "I'm reading unusual energy signatures coming from deeper within the structure. It's not like anything we've ever seen before." Captain Ryland nodded, her gaze fixed on the path ahead. "We'll take it slow. Stay sharp, everyone." The ship's engines slowed as they carefully navigated the massive corridors of the hidden facility. The walls seemed to close in on them, yet the space was vast, far larger than any structure they had encountered before. As they ventured further, the crew began to notice something odd. The air felt different here, charged with an energy that made the hair on the back of their necks stand up. It was as though this place was more than just a relic of the past. It was something alive, something waiting to be reawakened. "Captain, look at this," Lieutenant Riker said urgently. His voice trembled with excitement and fear. "There are doors all around us, and they're opening." Captain Ryland turned her head toward the view screen. Sure enough, the massive doors, once sealed shut for untold centuries, began to slide open one by one. Beyond them, the crew saw the faint glimmer of ancient machinery, dormant but still intact. "Stay alert," Captain Ryland ordered. "We don't know what's behind those doors. This place might not be as empty as it seems." The warship slowed to a crawl as they approached the first open door. It revealed a large chamber with towering walls made of the same reflective material as the entrance. In the center of the room stood something that made the crew's blood run cold, a massive humanoid figure encased in glass. This can't be real," Lieutenant Duran whispered. The figure was at least 20 feet tall, its body armored and designed for combat. But it wasn't a human. It wasn't anything the crew had ever seen before. The eyes of the figure, though closed in the glass chamber, seemed to pulse with life, as if it was watching them. Captain Ryland's heart raced. She approached the chamber slowly, the crew following in a tight formation. "What is this?" she asked, more to herself than anyone else. Lieutenant Riker, his voice shaky, responded, "This is beyond anything we could have imagined. This could be one of the legendary human war machines, a war machine that was built for something more than just battle." The crew remained silent as they stared at the figure. Its sheer size and design were unlike anything in the galaxy. Yet it wasn't just the war machine that intrigued them. It was the fact that it had been preserved here, hidden in the heart of this forgotten place. This was clearly no ordinary relic. It was a key to understanding what had happened to humanity and why their fleets had vanished from the galaxy for so long. "We need to keep moving," Captain Ryland said, her voice firm. She knew there was more to uncover. Whatever this place was, it was a treasure trove of forgotten history, and she wasn't about to let fear stop her from uncovering its secrets. The crew continued their journey deeper into the facility. The energy signatures were growing stronger, guiding them forward. It wasn't just the war machine that had been preserved. It was clear now that the entire facility was a monument to humanity's greatest achievements. But what had happened to humanity? Why had they disappeared from the galaxy? And why had these ships, these war machines, been hidden away for so long? "Captain," Lieutenant Riker said, his voice filled with awe, "I'm picking up something. Massive. It's ahead of us. Something enormous." Captain Ryland's pulse quickened. Whatever lay ahead was the answer to all their questions. She could feel it in her bones. They were close. The truth was just beyond the next door. "Everyone, brace yourselves," she ordered, as the warship moved toward the massive structure ahead. "We're about to find out what this place really is." The door ahead slowly slid open, revealing an enormous chamber. In the center, surrounded by towering pillars, stood a massive control console. It hummed with ancient power, the energy flowing through its circuits like a heartbeat. And in the center of the room, rising from the floor like some kind of monument, was a massive star map, a map of the galaxy, but not the galaxy as they knew it. This map was different. It was a map of humanity's lost empire, an empire that stretched far beyond the reaches of the known galaxy. As the crew stared at the map, it became clear. Humanity had been more than just a power in the galaxy. They had been the galaxy's rulers, its protectors, its masters. And now, after millennia of silence, they were about to return. Captain Ryland's heart raced. The warships had risen, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Captain Ryland's breath caught in her chest as she stared at the glowing star map. The vastness of it was overwhelming. The map wasn't just a chart of stars. It was a record of humanity's once great empire, stretching far beyond the galaxy as they knew it. Some parts of the map were still shifting, as if waiting for something. She couldn't help but feel that it was more than just a relic. It was alive, pulsing with energy, calling to them. "What is this?" Lieutenant Duran whispered, his voice shaking with awe. "This isn't just a map, it's a message." Captain Ryland nodded, unable to tear her eyes away from the ancient, intricate design. The stars on the map shifted like pieces of a puzzle coming together, revealing hidden sectors and long-forgotten territories. There were names of planets that hadn't been spoken of in thousands of years. Humanity's reach had been far greater than anyone could have imagined. "It's a record of every planet humanity once controlled," Ryland murmured. "And it's not just a map. It's telling us where we need to go." As the crew stared at the map, the hum of the control console grew louder, almost as if it were responding to their presence. Suddenly, the map flickered, and a new set of coordinates appeared. Coordinates that pointed directly to a distant star system on the far edge of the galaxy. "We need to go there," Captain Ryland said, her voice steady but full of determination. "That's where we'll find the answers." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had come this far, but no one could deny the magnitude of what lay ahead. They were about to venture into the unknown, into a region of space that had been untouched by anyone for millennia. "Captain, are we sure about this?" Lieutenant Riker asked, his face tense. "We don't even know what's out there." Captain Ryland turned to face her crew, her expression resolute. "We have no choice. We have to understand what happened to humanity, why we disappeared. If we don't, the galaxy will never know the full story, and it might never recover." The tension in the room was thick, but the crew understood. They were no longer just exploring the past. They were embarking on a journey that could change the future of the galaxy. "We're not just looking for answers," Captain Ryland added, her eyes narrowing with resolve. "We're bringing humanity back. We've waited long enough." The crew nodded, and the ship's engines hummed to life. They were ready. There was no turning back now. As the warship moved forward, the path through the ancient facility became clearer. The energy that had pulsed through the walls now felt more like a guiding force, leading them to the next stage of their journey. It was as though the very walls of the structure had been waiting for them to arrive. And with every step, the crew could feel the immense power hidden deep within the facility. The power of humanity's ancient war machines, long forgotten but not extinguished. Ahead, the massive doors that had once sealed off the rest of the facility began to open, revealing the massive hangar. Inside, the crew could barely make out the shapes of colossal warships, their hulking forms half buried under layers of dust and debris. Some were completely intact, while others had suffered damage over the centuries. But one thing was clear: the warships were still powerful, and they were still waiting to be awakened. "Prepare for landing," Captain Rylan ordered. "This is it. We're about to see what humanity's might really looks like." The warship slowed as it approached the hangar bay. The crew could see now that the warships inside the hangar were not just any ships. They were designed for combat on a scale that no modern fleet could even comprehend. They were enormous, with weapons and armor that made the current ships seem like toys by comparison. Each one of these warships had been built for a single purpose: to dominate the galaxy. As the warship landed softly on the hangar floor, the crew stepped out, their eyes wide with amazement. The air was thick with the scent of rust and decay, but underneath that, there was something else, a faint but unmistakable feeling of power. These ships had been waiting, dormant for eons, and now they were ready to awaken. "Look at this," Lieutenant Riker said in a hushed voice, stepping up to one of the massive warships. "This isn't just technology. This is history. This is humanity's legacy." The crew moved cautiously, exploring the hangar and the warships within. It was clear that humanity had once ruled the galaxy with a strength no one could match. And yet, the question remained: why had these ships been abandoned? What had happened to humanity to cause such a fall from grace? Captain Ryland stood silently before one of the warships, her mind racing. The answers were out there, waiting for them to find them. The next steps in their journey would take them deeper into the unknown. And with every discovery, they grew closer to understanding the truth about the rise and fall of humanity. "Captain," Lieutenant Duran's voice broke through her thoughts. "I think I've found something." He pointed to a control panel on one of the warships. It flickered to life as Duran pressed a button. Suddenly, the massive doors of the hangar closed, and the walls began to shift, revealing more warships hidden in secret compartments. Ryland's heart raced as she realized what was happening. The facility wasn't just a relic. It was an arsenal, one that had been waiting to be awakened. And now, humanity's battle fleet was ready to rise once more. The warship's engines thrummed with power, and the crew stood in the massive hangar, surrounded by the colossal warships of humanity's forgotten past. The sound of the doors closing echoed in the empty space, sealing them inside with their newfound discovery. There was no turning back now. They were no longer explorers. They were custodians of humanity's greatest weapon. Captain Ryland stood at the front of the group, her gaze locked on the massive warships towering before them. Their sleek designs and immense size were awe-inspiring. Each one was a testament to the power humanity once wielded. She couldn't help but feel the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. These ships had once ruled the galaxy, and now they were waking up after thousands of years of silence. "Get ready," she said, her voice steady, but filled with an unspoken determination. "We're about to bring these ships back online." Lieutenant Duran, standing beside her, nodded nervously. "Captain, are we sure we can do this? These ships are ancient, and we have no idea what kind of damage they've taken over the millennia." Ryland glanced at him, her expression resolute. "We don't have a choice. The galaxy needs to know what happened to humanity. We need to know. And if we don't reactivate these ships, no one will ever understand the full story." The rest of the crew gathered around, watching as Ryland activated the main console at the center of the hangar. The old technology flickered to life, displaying a series of commands that only a few in the crew understood. The systems were alive again, and as Rylan worked, it became clear that the ships weren't just dormant. They were waiting for something, waiting for the right people to come and unlock their power. "Captain, I'm getting something," Lieutenant Riker said, his voice tense. "There's a signal, one that matches the command codes of the fleet." Rylan's heart skipped a beat. A signal? After all this time, it was impossible. She moved quickly to Riker's side, her mind racing. "What kind of signal?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's a transmission, but it's ancient. I can barely make it out. It's repeating a series of commands." Riker's hands flew over his console, trying to decode the message. Raylan leaned in, watching as the letters on the screen slowly formed words. The message was in the old human language, but it was unmistakable. "Command acknowledge. Fleet mobilization protocol initiated." Mobilization. Rylan repeated, barely able to comprehend the weight of what she was reading. These ships had been waiting for a command, and now that command had been received. The walls of the hangar suddenly came alive with energy as the warships began to power up. Their immense reactors hummed to life, filling the air with an electric charge. Lights flickered on inside the ships, revealing massive weapon systems and defensive shields that hadn't been seen in millennia. The crew watched in awe as the warship's massive bulkhead slid open, revealing the dark void of space. The ancient ships, now fully awake, began to move, their colossal engines igniting. It was as if the fleet had been waiting for them, ready to be unleashed. But something was wrong. "Captain," Lieutenant Joran shouted, "there's an anomaly in the system. The ships, they're not just waking up. They're reacting to something out there, something we can't see." Rylan turned, her gaze narrowing. "What do you mean?" "The ships are aligned with a signal," Joran continued, his voice tense. "It's not just a command, it's a warning. A warning that these ships were never meant to return." A chill ran down Rylan's spine. What kind of warning was out there? And why hadn't anyone in the galaxy mentioned it? The warships continued to power up, their weapons systems coming online. The massive energy cannons, long dormant, began to hum with a terrifying resonance. It was clear now. These ships were not just relics. They were built for war on a scale no one had ever dreamed of. And they were ready to fight. "Get to the control room," Rylan ordered. "We need to understand what's happening." Now, the crew rushed to the command center, where the situation was growing even more dire. The ship's systems were responding to the unknown signal, pulling them toward a location that none of them could have predicted. "We're being pulled toward a star system," Lieutenant Riker reported, his eyes wide. "A system that no one has ever charted before." Rylan felt the weight of the moment. The ships were following a trail that led them to something hidden deep within the galaxy, a mystery that no one had ever expected to uncover. "Captain," Lieutenant Joran spoke again, his voice filled with urgency. "The fleet's weapons are at full power. They're waiting for a command, and that command could change everything." Rylan's mind raced. The fleet was prepared to fight. But what was the enemy? What force had the power to wake up these ships from their long slumber? "We need answers," she said, her voice unwavering. "But one thing is clear. We're not the only ones out here. And whatever we find, it's going to be bigger than anything we've ever imagined." The crew stood in stunned silence as the warships continued their preparations. The stage was set. The battle, centuries in the making, was about to begin. And humanity's battle fleet, reborn from the ashes of time, would be the key to what came next. The warships drifted through space, their massive forms now a constant presence in the vast emptiness. The crew aboard their flagship, the Phoenix, could only stare out of the windows at the stars, the unknown destination pulling them in like a powerful magnet. Every crew member felt the tension, each one aware that they were on the verge of uncovering something monumental. But the question remained, was it something that humanity was ready to face, Or was it a challenge that would test their very existence? Captain Ryland stood on the bridge, her eyes locked on the star system ahead. It was not on any star map, and yet it felt as though it was calling them. The signal, the one that had reawakened the fleet, was growing stronger the closer they got. It was impossible to ignore. Captain, the fleet's systems are responding more intensely now, Lieutenant Riker reported, his voice strained. Whatever is out there, it's getting ready for us. The ship's sensors displayed strange energy readings from the system ahead. There was no doubt now that whatever awaited them wasn't just a distant anomaly. It was a force, one that seemed to have been waiting for humanity's return. Ryland gripped the armrest of her chair, her knuckles turning white. "Full speed ahead," she ordered. "We can't stop now. We need to know what we're walking into." As the Phoenix sped toward the unknown system, the rest of the ancient fleet followed suit, their engines roaring to life, shaking the very fabric of space around them. The colossal ships moved as one, a force of nature that could not be ignored. The galaxy had never seen such power in all its millennia of history. The crew continued to monitor the systems, but the tension in the air was palpable. Ryland could feel it in her bones. This was no ordinary mission. They weren't just uncovering a mystery. They were about to step into the heart of something much larger. "Captain," Lieutenant Joran spoke up, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and fear. "We've entered the system, but there's something here." Ryland's eyes narrowed. The view ahead revealed a large, dark object, a massive structure, its surface shimmering with strange energy patterns. It was unlike anything they had ever encountered. "Is it a weapon?" Riker asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ryland didn't answer immediately. She could feel it. Something was out there, waiting. A deep, unsettling presence that filled the ship's sensors and caused the air to feel thick with tension. "Prepare for a scan," she commanded, her voice firm. "Let's see what we're really dealing with." As the scans began, the readings grew more intense. The object was emitting energy at a level far beyond anything humanity had ever harnessed. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a fortress, a weaponized monument. And it was clear now that it had been built for a purpose, to keep something at bay. "The scans show something inside," Riker reported. "It's almost as if there's something alive in there." The hairs on the back of Ryland's neck stood up. She had thought that the fleet's awakening was merely a coincidence, a random chain of events that had led them to this moment. But now, she realized with growing dread, this was no accident. Humanity's warships had been designed for a reason: to fight, to defend, and to win. But against what? "Ryland," Lieutenant Joran spoke softly, almost fearfully. "The signals, it's as if they're trying to communicate. I think it's calling us." Ryland looked at the massive structure again. This was no mere relic. This was a sign, a signal, and it was connected to the fleet. "We're not just here to fight," she muttered under her breath. "We're here to face something ancient, something older than any empire, older than anything we've ever known." With a jolt, the ship's systems screamed in alarm. The dark structure began to react. Energy surged from its depths, spiraling outward, and the warships of humanity began to align, ready to defend, ready to strike. But then, just as quickly as it had begun, the energy pulses stopped. Silence engulfed the fleet. Not a sound, not a movement, and for a split second, Ryland could feel her heart stop. Were they too late? Had they walked into a trap? And then came the voice. It was a soft hum at first, barely perceptible, but it was there. The voice of something ancient and powerful. "Humanity has returned." The words echoed through the fleet's systems. The sound was in their heads, inside their bones. Ryland's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the presence. It was like an ancient god, a power that had seen civilizations rise and fall. "You've come to the heart of your ancestors," the voice continued, its tone both warm and chilling. "But beware, for not all who return seek peace. The tension in the air thickened. The fleet had come to this moment, not for glory, but for survival. And as the voice of the ancient entity echoed across the vast expanse of space, Rylan understood. This was no longer about the past. This was about the future, and humanity's future was now tied to the mysteries of the Forgotten Fleet. "Prepare for the unknown," Rylan said quietly, her voice unwavering. "This is just the beginning. Whatever happens, we stand together." As the fleet moved forward into the unknown, Rylan couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, this confrontation, would define humanity's place in the galaxy. Whether they would rise or fall depended on the choices they made now. The final confrontation had begun, and the fate of the galaxy rested in their hands.